The 1990s marked the beginning of a new era for the financial world. Banks worldwide were transitioning from paper-based systems to digital platforms, introducing online banking services that promised speed and convenience. However, this digital shift also opened a dangerous new frontier, one that criminals quickly learned to exploit. With minimal encryption standards, weak firewalls, and almost no cyber policing infrastructure in place, early hackers had a golden opportunity. The case of Vladimir Levine, a Russian mathematician who breached Citibank's internal systems in 1995, became a watershed moment in cybersecurity history. Using nothing more than a laptop and some dial-up tools, Levin siphoned funds from over 15 corporate accounts and attempted to move nearly $11 million across international borders. Although he was eventually arrested in London and extradited to the US, most of the stolen money was never recovered, highlighting both the technical genius and the enforcement limitations of that time. This incident was not isolated. Other breaches followed, including small-scale digital thefts in European and Asian banks. At this point, the internet was still relatively young, and many financial institutions didn't even have full-time cybersecurity departments. Hackers exploited email vulnerabilities, basic brute force attacks, and poor password hygiene to gain access to sensitive systems. Meanwhile, traditional law enforcement agencies lacked the technical skills and legal frameworks to keep up with these new age criminals. During this period, the dark web began to form, an unindexed portion of the internet where stolen credit card numbers, bank logins, and hacking tools could be bought and sold anonymously. Cybercriminals began collaborating in these hidden communities, trading scripts and malware like merchandise. The rise of early Trojan viruses like NetBus and Sub7 allowed hackers to take remote control of computers, including those inside banking institutions, without users ever knowing. Despite increasing evidence of coordinated attacks, banks often chose to keep breaches quiet to avoid public panic and maintain customer trust. This silence allowed hackers to refine their methods without scrutiny. Moreover, the fragmented nature of cybercrime laws across borders created loopholes that criminals could easily exploit. One country's crime was another's unregulated gray area. By the early 2000s, the stage was set. Hackers had developed tools, networks, and a thriving underground economy. Banks were now part of a digital ecosystem they did not fully understand. The quiet thefts of the 90s would soon evolve into full-scale heists, with millions, and eventually billions, on the line. The era of cyber warfare against banks had officially begun. As the internet matured in the early 2000s, cybercrime escalated from isolated incidents to coordinated global operations. With the growth of online banking, mobile transactions, and ATM networks, banks had expanded their digital footprints, but security measures remained fragmented and outdated. This was the era when cybercrime evolved from a fringe activity into a full-fledged underground economy. One of the most notable trends of this period was the rise of Eastern European cybercriminal networks, particularly from Russia and Ukraine. These groups operated like corporations, complete with hierarchies, salaries, and R&D departments for building malware. They pioneered techniques that would later become standard in major heists, including phishing emails, Trojan viruses, and keyloggers that silently recorded users' banking credentials. Turning point came with the development and proliferation of the Zeus Trojan in 2007. Zeus was a sophisticated piece of malware that allowed hackers to steal online banking information through keystroke logging and form grabbing. It infected millions of computers worldwide and was used to transfer money from victim accounts to fake corporations controlled by money mules. The Spy Eye Trojan, a competitor and eventual partner to Zeus, further refined these tactics. Meanwhile, cyber attacks took on geopolitical dimensions. In 2007, Estonia, one of the most digitally advanced nations, suffered a massive cyber attack that crippled its banking system, government websites, and media. Widely believed to be state-sponsored, the attack revealed how fragile national digital infrastructures had become and how easily financial systems could be paralyzed without firing a single shot. During this time, money laundering techniques also became more advanced. Cybercriminals used online casinos, offshore banks, and early cryptocurrencies to clean stolen funds. Law enforcement struggled to keep up, often hampered by jurisdictional issues and outdated laws. Banks were repeatedly targeted because they represented high-value returns with relatively low technical defenses. What began in the 90s as petty theft had transformed into a lucrative global enterprise, with billions at stake. Between 2013 and 2018, the financial world was rocked by a series of high-profile cyber attacks orchestrated by a shadowy group known as Carbanak, later linked to the Cobalt Gang. Unlike earlier hackers who targeted individual users or accounts, this group went directly after banks' internal systems, exploiting vulnerabilities with surgical precision. The Carbanak gang used spear phishing emails to infiltrate bank employee networks. These emails often mimicked legitimate communication and contained malicious attachments that installed a remote access Trojan, RAT. Once inside the system, the hackers didn't immediately steal money. They patiently observed employee behavior, internal processes, and the bank's transaction infrastructure for weeks or even months. After mapping the institution's operations, the hackers would take control of internal systems, including ATMs, money transfer protocols, and SWIFT terminals. They could command ATMs to dispense cash at specific times, triggering withdrawals coordinated with criminal partners on the ground. In other cases, they altered account balances and transferred millions into offshore accounts without setting off internal alarms. What made Carbanak unique was their deep understanding of banking operations. This wasn't just brute force hacking. It was digital espionage, mimicking insider actions to avoid detection. Investigators eventually estimated that over 100 financial institutions in more than 40 countries were affected, with total losses reaching $1 billion. The gang operated like a startup, hiring programmers, adapting their malware, and evolving faster than most cybersecurity teams could respond. Despite multiple arrests and disruptions, including a high-profile arrest of one Carbanak leader in Spain in 2018, the group's tactics inspired copycat operations and signaled the beginning of a new age in cyber bank theft, where the attackers don't just breach systems, they become part of them. The Carbanak case proved that banks could no longer rely on traditional defenses. Cybercriminals had entered the system, not just metaphorically, but literally, making it clear that the future of financial crime would be fought in code, not cash. In what remains one of the most audacious and sophisticated cyber bank heists in modern history, hackers attempted to steal nearly $1 billion from the Bangladesh Bank, the country's central bank, by exploiting vulnerabilities in the global financial messaging system known as SWIFT. This 2016 attack wasn't just a story of lost millions. It was a global wake-up call about the fragility of the world's banking infrastructure. The attack began with malware infiltrating the bank's internal systems, likely via a well-crafted phishing email. The malware gave hackers access to credentials for SWIFT, the secure platform banks use to send payment instructions. Armed with this access, the criminals issued dozens of false transfer requests to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, where Bangladesh's foreign currency reserves were held. The initial goal was breathtaking: steal $951 million. Several transactions were executed successfully, transferring $101 million to accounts in Sri Lanka and the Philippines. While the Sri Lankan transaction was flagged and stopped due to a spelling error in the beneficiary's name, $81 million successfully made it into the Philippines, most of which was funneled through local casinos and disappeared into the underworld. The aftermath exposed deep flaws not only in Bangladesh Bank's IT infrastructure, but in the global financial system itself. The SWIFT network, once considered nearly impregnable, had been exploited using basic phishing techniques and poor endpoint security. Even more shocking was the revelation that the attack had been detected by some systems, but security alerts were ignored due to system delays and procedural lapses. The Lazarus Group, a cybercrime organization widely believed to be linked to North Korea, was later implicated in the heist. Cybersecurity firms and U.S. intelligence connected the dots between this attack and other malicious campaigns attributed to Lazarus. The event marked a turning point, demonstrating that state-sponsored cybercriminals could penetrate the highest levels of global finance using tools as simple as a Word document with embedded malware. As the world began connecting the dots between major financial cyber attacks, one name emerged repeatedly: The Lazarus Group, a highly advanced hacking unit, believed to operate under the direction of North Korea's Reconnaissance General Bureau. Far from rogue criminals, Lazarus represented a new evolution in cybercrime, where hacking became a tool of statecraft, designed to fund a sanctioned regime cut off from global finance. The Lazarus Group's fingerprints were all over the Bangladesh bank heist, but this was just one chapter in a larger playbook. Operating since at least 2009, Lazarus initially focused on espionage and disruption. However, facing economic isolation and international sanctions, North Korea allegedly turned to cybercrime as an alternative source of funding. Bank heists, ransomware attacks, and cryptocurrency thefts became key pillars of this new strategy. One of their most prolific campaigns was Operation Fast Cash, which targeted banks in Africa and Asia. Lazarus hackers gained access to bank networks, then manipulated ATM switch systems, allowing coordinated mules to withdraw cash from ATMs in multiple countries at the same moment. Some of these operations saw tens of millions vanish within hours, with very few funds ever recovered. In 2017, Lazarus launched WannaCry, a global ransomware attack that crippled hospitals, corporations, and governments. Though not directly aimed at banks, the attack reinforced how North Korea was using cyber tools to cause mass disruption while seeking financial gain. The malware's code and infrastructure shared similarities with tools used in earlier bank heists, further tying it to Lazarus. The group also turned its attention to cryptocurrency exchanges, exploiting the lack of regulation and rapid expansion of digital finance. From CoinCheck in Japan to KuCoin in Singapore, Lazarus orchestrated multi-million-dollar thefts, siphoning funds into digital wallets that were nearly impossible to trace. These heists helped circumvent sanctions, fueling North Korea's nuclear and military programs. Lazarus's activity demonstrated a chilling reality. Cyber bank theft had evolved from a criminal enterprise to a weapon of rogue states. The lines between cybercrime, espionage, and economic warfare had blurred. Banks were no longer just guarding money. They were defending against international adversaries wielding malware instead of missiles. As financial systems embraced innovation and decentralization, a new battlefield emerged for hackers, fintech, and cryptocurrency platforms. Unlike traditional banks, which had begun strengthening their cybersecurity frameworks, many fintech startups and crypto exchanges prioritized growth and user adoption over robust security. This created a goldmine for modern cybercriminals. Tature, cryptocurrency space in particular, became a prime target. In 2018, the CoinCheck exchange in Japan was hacked, resulting in the loss of over $530 million worth of NM tokens, one of the largest crypto heists in history. CoinCheck had stored customer assets in hot wallets, which are connected to the internet and highly vulnerable to external attacks. The breach exposed not only the technical weaknesses of exchanges, but also the lack of regulation and oversight in the crypto world. This trend continued with the Poly network hack in 2021, where a hacker exploited a vulnerability in the smart contract coding and transferred over $600 million in cryptocurrencies to themselves. In an unexpected twist, the hacker later returned the funds, claiming it was done for fun and to highlight the platform's vulnerabilities. While the money was recovered, the incident proved that even decentralized platforms marketed as trustless were vulnerable to human coding errors and digital loopholes. One of the most catastrophic attacks occurred in 2022 when the Ronin network, a blockchain used by the popular game Axie Infinity, was hacked. Lazarus Group was again suspected of orchestrating the breach, which led to the theft of over $625 million in Ethereum and USDC. The attack leveraged social engineering to gain access to validator nodes, again showcasing the human element of most cyber breaches. With these developments, hackers had effectively shifted their focus from traditional banks to emerging financial ecosystems. DeFi, decentralized finance, NFTs, and smart contracts, despite their promise of security through decentralization, became attractive targets due to immature security protocols and a lack of industry-wide standards. This transition marked the new age of digital heists, where billions could be stolen without ever touching a brick-and-mortar bank. The rise of billion-dollar cyber heists triggered alarm across the global financial and political landscape. Governments, financial institutions, and private cybersecurity firms began forging public-private partnerships to counter increasingly advanced cyber threats. Agencies like Europol, Interpol, the FBI, and national cybersecurity centers worldwide initiated joint task forces to investigate cross-border attacks and bring cybercriminals to justice. One of the most critical developments was the adoption of the Zero Trust Architecture, ZTA, in banking cybersecurity, a model that assumes no user or system is inherently trustworthy and continuously verifies every request. Financial institutions began investing in AI-driven threat detection, multi-factor authentication, and endpoint monitoring tools to prevent lateral movement within networks, a tactic widely used in attacks like the Carbanak and Bangladesh Bank. Heists, regulatory bodies too stepped up. The European Union's GDPR and the U.S. introduction of stricter FINRA and SEC cybersecurity guidelines enforced disclosure of breaches and raised the bar for data protection. Additionally, the SWIFT system underwent extensive reforms, mandating more rigorous security audits and software updates to prevent further misuse. On the enforcement side, arrests and indictments became more frequent. Russian, Ukrainian, North Korean, and Chinese nationals were charged and sanctioned, although extradition and prosecution remained difficult due to geopolitical tensions. The U.S. and its allies imposed sanctions on cyber units tied to North Korea and Iran, attempting to choke off financial lifelines to state-backed cybercrime. At the same time, a white hat movement surged in popularity. Ethical hackers began working with banks, government agencies, and private companies to identify vulnerabilities before they could be exploited. Bug bounty programs grew, offering financial rewards for responsibly disclosing software flaws. Despite all these measures, cybercriminals continued to adapt. The race between defense and offense intensified. Banks now had to treat cybersecurity as a core pillar of operation, not just a technical department. Recognizing that one breach could destroy decades of customer trust, reputational capital, and billions in losses. Looking forward, the war between banks and cybercriminals shows no signs of slowing. In fact, the battlefield is evolving with unprecedented speed. Emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, AI, and machine learning, ML, are double-edged swords, used both to detect threats in real time and to launch more convincing phishing scams, deepfakes, and synthetic fraud. Hackers are beginning to experiment with AI-generated voice attacks, where a CEO's voice is cloned to approve fraudulent transactions. Meanwhile, deepfake videos and real-time facial recognition spoofs threaten biometric authentication systems. The potential for AI-driven malware that can self-replicate and adapt its behavior could outpace current defensive mechanisms. Another looming threat is the rise of quantum computing. While still in its infancy, a powerful quantum computer could break today's encryption standards in minutes, rendering global banking protocols obsolete. Financial institutions are now investing in post-quantum encryption, but until it becomes standard, the threat remains on the horizon. Additionally, cybercrime is increasingly used as a geopolitical tool. Rogue states and sanctioned regimes continue to weaponize cyber attacks not just for financial gain, but to undermine rival economies, sow distrust, and cause systemic instability. This creates an environment where cybercrime blends seamlessly with cyber warfare. In this future landscape, cybersecurity is no longer just a technical necessity. It is a critical component of national defense, economic policy, and corporate governance. As the lines between criminal enterprise and nation-state operations blur, the world must remain vigilant, innovative, and collaborative to prevent the next billion-dollar digital bank heist from shaking the foundations of the global economy.